Hey good people, Noah here once again from the Overclocker. So as per title, today I'm looking at the ASUS Prime GeForce RTX 5060, the OC version to be exact, which is the most affordable ASUS 5060 we can buy locally. Well, that is relative as well, because when I looked on Progenics, it was listed as out of stock, but when it was in stock, it was at around 9,100. So assuming that's the actual price, it's a lot to ask for compared to what other vendors are offering, considering as well that there are premium versions from said vendors that retail for 2,000 Rand less than this card. However, since I don't have the actual price, let's assume it's better than what we have here. Before I get into anything, note that all performance data you're going to see here is going to be at 1080p, as most of the games tested here consume upwards of 5 GB of memory. Obviously, DLSS would change this memory footprint, but assuming you're not using it for whatever reason, the tests here are all at 1080p. This is a fairly simple card, which is near identical, if not identical, outside of the dimensions to the RTX 5060 Ti 16GB model you saw months ago. As such, there's no need to talk much about the physical aspects of this card. It uses an 8-pin PCIe power connector on a small board where the heatsink extends past it by a fair chunk. Even with that, the card is small, measuring at just over 268mm by 120mm. It's a small card with 3 appropriately small fans of the XL ball bearing type. We have the usual dual BIOS switch, which is by default in the performance mode, which is how I tested it here. And speaking of testing was done on the AMD Ryzen 9 9900X, the ROG Crosshair X870i ATX, 64GB of Kingston Fury Beast DDR5 memory, all of which was powered by the Corsair HX1500i and cooled by the Corsair Titan RX LCD AIO. Where overclocking is concerned, it's fairly straightforward in terms of expected clock boost ranges. Plus 400 on the core and 3000 for the memory is usually where RTX 50 series cards I've tested top out to date. It wasn't much different here, and overclock settings you'll see here represent these clock adjustments, combined with the 17% power draw boost. As per usual, I'll start with the 3D Mark tests. The difference between this and the Prime RTX 5060 Ti 16GB, which is the reference one here, is small at just 4% in the older TimesFire Extreme benchmark, but the Ti does have a 19% advantage in the newer Speedway test. Overclocking obviously reduces the performance differences, but clearly not enough to close the gap entirely. That being said, I do wish the differences between these cards was bigger, primarily in both of them being faster in general, and secondly, perhaps a more meaningful difference between them. In the Unigen Heaven 4K optimized benchmark, the Prime 5060 starts with a 15% deficit to the Ti model, but when overclocked, ends up faster than the 5060 Ti. The scores are low on both cards, and the 5060 Ti succumbing in any shape, way or form to the 5060 is a bit disappointing for it, but it does remain impressive for the 5060. Before the gaming benchmarks, I may as well speak about power consumption and temperature. You're looking at really low temps when gaming with this card at just 63 degrees at most in firmware, which is closer to the mid-50s in gaming. Power consumption is appropriately managed at 142 watts during gameplay. That goes up though with overclocking, of course, to a maximum of just over 170 watts. You'll also note that the 5070 Ti draws about twice as much power and delivers exactly twice the performance in many instances. Anyway, in Hitman World of Assassination, you see what I was talking about earlier. Overclocking adds 10% to the 5060's base performance, which is already respectable in this game at about 60 frames per second, using the highest graphics fidelity settings possible and with no DLSS. I would, however, use it at the highest quality to improve the overall experience, not only in performance, but the visuals to some degree. For the sake of future comparisons though, between this and a Radeon card, I've chosen not to use DLSS in any benchmark where avoidable, and instead opted for the in-game AA and upscaling method. In Forza Horizon 5, the overclock makes barely any difference in the average frame rates, but manages to bring up the 1% lows by a meaningful margin. Again, DLSS is an option here that I definitely use. The base performance is good enough though for what it is. Next up is Cyberpunk 2077. We see an 11% gain in performance when overclocking the card for the equivalent power draw increase. So what you're looking at here, I'd say, is well worth it because you're not really consuming that much power at default anyway. In F1 2024, the Prime card has great performance, of course, which is further improved by 12% when overclocking is added. More than acceptable performance for most people, and a title where frame generation in combination with DLSS can be further used to enhance the experience. Next up is Dragon Age, and once again the 5060 delivers a comfortable play experience at 66 frames per second. With this sort of performance, quality DLSS and fade touch textures can be used at similar or very much playable frame rates. In Alan Wake 2, the game of course uses DLSS by default, and that's a good thing because it's not playable otherwise. The play experience is smooth most of the time, but you do once in a while get some inconsistent frame pacing and a dip in performance. This is especially when you consider that the average frame rates go up when overclocking, but the minimum remains excessively low at about 25 to 26 frames per second. In Spider-Man 2, I'm not sure what's going on here. I think it could be memory related, where the 8GB of memory is limiting performance at the settings I chose. Overclocking makes little to no difference here. In this title, you've no choice but to enable DLSS to get playable frame rates. Last is Expedition 33, the only Unreal Engine 5 game here, and we see that DLSS here is not optional but a must. In any other game, this frame rate that's within this narrow band would be fairly smooth, but here it's choppy, necessitating the need for DLSS to smooth things out. It's not perfect, but it does make a difference. Overclocking here adds 12% to the base 5060's performance once again. And that's pretty much it for the Prime GeForce RTX 5060 08G. I'm not sure when or if this card will ever be available here, but at a low enough price point, it may be worth it for people who game at 1080p as you can see, or are coming from older entry-level GPUs from years ago like the RTX 2060. As for the card itself, barring the pricing, it's a safe design that doesn't do much to stand out, but I suppose that's what makes it more affordable than other ASUS cards. It runs cool, consumes little power, and is capable of decent gaming at 1080p. Anyway, there's not much more for me to say about this card, so until the next time, do take great care of yourselves, and I'll see you on the flip side. Peace!